Pretty good gear day.
What?
Chair.
Kurt, we ready?
From here.
All right. We're ready when you guys are.
Charlie's just coming in. Heather, I guess so. Everybody was confused.
All right. Welcome to the Monday, August 6th Transportation Commission meeting. First agenda item is to approve the July 9th regular meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve? Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion to approve passes 7.
No, I need to abstain.
You need to abstain. Okay, 6-0. All right.
You were gone. Yes, okay.
Second item is general public comment. These are comments that are not part of what is on the agenda tonight. And as in the rest of the meeting, you will have 3 minutes to comment. And our general practice is that we will not discuss this tonight or debate this tonight or make decisions on anything that you bring up tonight. So if you could come to the podium, state your name, sign in, and I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Ken Easthouse. I'm at 1303 East 25th Terrace. I'm here to speak regarding the proposed infrastructure improvements scheduled for the Parade Park neighborhood as part of the Safe Routes to Schools grant awarded in late 2017. Survey work recently began on our neighborhood on East 25th Terrace from Ponderosa Street to O'Connell Drive, more than a mile stretch of road. After calling the surveyors, we discovered that a sidewalk was slated to be put in on the opposite side of the road from an existing sidewalk. It is also the largest project within the grant application as well, so we were told. However, none of the homeowners were made aware of the planned sidewalk at the homes in their yards. Also, as the current president of the neighborhood association, I or our organization was not notified of the proposed sidewalk as well. We were not made aware until we had to make calls around when the utility lines were marked in all of our yards. We have been working as a neighborhood to list our priorities, which do include traffic calming devices on major thoroughfares, including speed bumps and crosswalks around the school, in order to make pedestrian traffic around the school safer. However, our neighborhood does not want, nor do we feel we need, a second sidewalk on East 25th Terrace. We would much rather the City and Traffic Commission amend the grant application to reallocate those funds for a sidewalk to speed bumps and crosswalks on East 25th Terrace and East 27th Terrace. City Code seems to indicate that new development does have sidewalks on both sides of the street, but this also presumes wider streets that are on East 25th Terrace presently. I thank you for your time, and I hope that you will consider this matter in the near future. I also plan on forwarding these remarks to the City Commission for tomorrow's meeting. Thank you.
Any other general public comments?
I didn't have really any prepared remarks, but my name is Sheila Ward, and I live at 1901 East 25th Terrace. I'm right on the corner of Kensington and 25th Terrace. My corner, our corner does not have any sort of stop signs or any sort of structure to stop, and my biggest concern about the sidewalk grant being on the south side of the road is safety concerns. I cannot stand out in my yard. I've lived there for 18 years without cars coming through that intersection and almost hitting each other. And I have a utility pole right in the corner of my yard. And, you know, if someone puts a garage sale sign on that utility pole, you know, people come through that intersection and they just put their brakes on and skid. I have people have came up in my yard in my 18 years several times just because of that intersection. So my fear is a sidewalk, especially there's only 3 houses from my yard going west to the new development closer to O'Connell. If kids are on that sidewalk, they're going to be a distraction for the folks that are coming around that curb and that corner. And I feel like it's a big safety issue. If they see the kids, they're going to run into each other. So as Ken stated, you know, I'd like to, you know, propose that the sidewalk be, the money be used from the sidewalk for different measures, like especially that intersection, as well as we have been on a list for 3 years for speed bumps on our road because people are coming off K10 and getting off into O'Connell and cutting down 25th Terrace to get to Haskell, and you know, they're driving really fast, and it's just a big safety issue. I did bring some pictures, I don't know, of my corner. I don't know if you guys want to pass those along. And Ken lives farther down as well on the end closer to Haskell. And there are a lot of duplexes on that end of the street as well that I took pictures of. They have 2 cars in their driveway and they're sticking out almost to the road. So really there's not even room for a sidewalk on that side of the street. And the last comment I'll make is my nephew went to Prairie Park for 5 years. He's at South now. The South bus does stop up in the newer section closer to O'Connell to let all the kids out in that area. So you know, the bus driver would probably stop closer to Kensington, you know, if there's a sidewalk in that area. And my little nephew would always leave Prairie Park and walk, you know, down the north side of the road all the way down 25th Terrace, and it was, you know, they were always safe. It wasn't as much of a safety issue as I think it will be on the south side, because if you look at these pictures, you'll see once they get to that corner of Kensington, if they cross over in that intersection in any way and enter on the south side, it's just going to be a huge safety issue for the children. And most of the children in Prairie Park head to the west when they leave school. They're not really particularly headed east down Kensington. So.
Thank you very much.
Do you guys want the pictures at all?
Yeah, if you have pictures and you want to leave them with us.
Okay, yeah. I have them on a jump drive too, if you, I made 2 sets.
Is there other general public comment? Okay, thank you. Our third agenda item is the KDOT Transportation Alternatives TA Grant Project List. I should ask first if there's anyone, I mean, I think it is our policy that we don't discuss these items tonight because they're not part of the agenda. So I just want to be sure that nobody has something that they want to say or relay to staff or anything before I move to item number 3 to back up a second. Pretty good. Okay. So item number 3, the KDOT Transportation Alternatives Grant Project List.
All right, so John Marburger with the engineering group. I'll just bring up our little show here. So you might remember from the study session we talked about the KDOT grant. So I won't rehash all the details of that, but basically they do have funding for safe routes to school. Lawrence did do the planning phase where we worked with the schools and we worked with the health department, worked with KDOT to develop that safe routes to school list. So now we're into there's a whole priority list of all those projects. So that's what the next phase would be for, up to $400,000 from KDOT plus our matching grant. And then the non-safe routes to school would be for other typically non-motorized type facilities, and there's no maximum request. It's just an 80-20 split. The city pays for all the engineering and the right-of-way, et cetera. So the possible project map that was developed based on our discussions and based on what staff feels that would score well with KDOT, the 6th Street shared use path from Monterey to Wisconsin, basically. The Lawrence Loop is portions of that could potentially be funded. I'll talk about why we're showing the sections we're showing. The Mass Street Bike Lane Conversion Project to extend what's already planned north of 14th Street. And then, of course, more safe routes to school type improvements to help increase the safety and access for the school kids. So this is just a slide showing kind of a breakdown, and this was in our memo as well, of the types of costs that we're looking for from KDOT, and then what our local match would be, you know, if we were to be selected for all of these projects. But as you can see, the numbers get pretty big, so we don't anticipate getting 100% for everything. So what we need to do as staff and present to the city commission is prioritize, you know, this list so that we're just submitting those applications to KDOT that we feel have the best chances of scoring high. So like 6th Street, you know, we could ask for all 4 of those, you know, but prioritize within those 4, you know, so if they only fund a portion of that project, then we can build as much as, you know, they'll give us, and we can match the rest. You know, so this list is kind of prioritized what we feel would score highest with KDOT. 6th Street comes up because primarily, you know, you get credit for high volume, high speed roads. You get credit for regional type facilities. So part of 6th Street's actually on the National Highway System. So they would see that as, I think, a high scoring thing. You know, it's the top of our bike ped priority list. So all those factors kind of go into what we think is going to score well. The Safe Routes to School, one of our last year's TA grant was to award those Safe Routes to School projects. So, you know, those are popular projects for KDOT to fund, and with our study and background and previous work, you know, that should put us in a good situation there. And then the loop, you know, part of the reasons we chose these 2 projects is just from the readiness standpoint, where KDOT's looking for projects that are, you know, could be designed and built and right away gathered by that 2020 time frame. So like the 29th Street project's a little gap, you know, that should be a pretty quick project. The 11th to 8th Street connection to extend up, we'd have to work with the railroad, so that might be a little bit of a stretch, but, you know, right here by City Hall and the river, that's a whole bigger railroad agreement, so that I think there's more study and more effort needed to put those other sections of the loop in a better position before we ask for grant funds for those. So we're not saying those other pieces are forgotten or not important, but these are the 2 sections we think are maybe the most close to being shovel ready and have the most study and support behind them. And then Massachusetts, probably I would recommend just probably taking that one off the list. You know, we would look at probably develop maybe 3 maximum grant applications. They do take a lot of time, and so again, not to say that's not important, but as far as what we think we can get ready for a grant application, I think the top 3 would be what we're looking to move forward with, and probably in that order, priority wise. So again, tonight we've got the commission here, and then city commission will ask for their resolution of support for the grant applications that we do give to KDOT. And of course, the MPO will have to as well give their resolution of support. And we'll do some grant applications. So that's what we've got. Any questions or comments, concerns from you guys? Seem pretty logical.
Is your, are you making any recommendation regarding the prioritization?
Well, the prioritization, you mean within?
Do we have to submit?
Yeah, I think we would recommend to KDOT that our first priority would be 6th Street, our second project would be Safe Routes to School, our third priority would be the loop.
Yeah, we want to get your feedback on what you think the priority should be, but based off of the scoring criteria, we feel that the 6th Street would score the highest based off of the KDOT scoring criteria, but I want to get your input, because we will need to put a 1, 2, and 3 next to these 3 applications.
And if you develop the 6th Street grant request, would you put all 4 of these legs in there? Or would, if we say some are more important than the others, you'd still do all 4 in the request?
Yeah, we could rank them within the request. You know, there's a couple gaps out there, and I guess we could take it right off our priority list, but, you know, coming from Monterey east, you know, there's already shared use path to the west all the way out to the loop, so, you know, whether it makes sense to build that way, or Wisconsin probably would score fairly high because that's a section on the actual national highway system, and then it connects to, you know, the shared use path across Iowa itself, so I'd probably put them all on there, but it would be, I would say from the outsides would probably be maybe the more priority, but we'd have to look at what right-of-way is available and all that too, so that all goes into seeing what's ready.
Did this list start with 10 projects or 20 projects, or how was it whittled down to these 4?
Well, we have a list of all of the unfunded bike ped projects that are on our priority network. And so we looked through that list and felt that these 4 would be the highest 4 that would fit the application and also score high with the bike ped prioritization criteria that we have.
Well, I guess the question would be, were there, just out of curiosity, as much as anything, there's 4 here, were there 1 or 2 others that were kind of in the running, or?
We talked a little bit about the Naismith Drive project
Yeah.
from 19th to 23rd Street, because we know that's a gap. That project has some, I think, challenges or decision-making that still needs, some thought that needs to go into that, whether we do bike lanes or a shared use path. Do we have enough right-of-way for a shared use path? Some of those different things that we would like to have more, better known answers before we submit the grant application.
Yeah.
So that one got thrown out there amongst staff. I can't specifically remember any others.
No, I think other than, you know, there's other categories, but I think we wanted to focus on knocking those things off our
Yeah.
prioritization list, because there is such a, as you know, a lot of people want their project higher on the list, and the way to do that is to knock out the ones that are already on the top of the list. So that was kind of the motivation there.
One other question I have, when I look at these 4, is it fair to ask which of these projects serve the most people? That will kind of influence, you know, opening up more people using these facilities.
No, I think that's fair, and I think that's something KDOT will look at, you know, and you might say, and the trick with, as you may know, with bike ped stuff is, you know, if they don't have a good facility to use, you know, it's hard to, you know, measure that demand today, of course, but, yeah, definitely, you know, they're gonna look at factors like how many, intersections does this remove from the system, or how many, you know, interactions between cars and bikes can we sort of alleviate with it. So high traffic on the main road, you know, it's hard to compare 6th Street, which has a lot of traffic, to the loop, which isn't adjacent to any traffic, right? So it's not an apples and oranges type thing, but certainly usage is part of it, and I think we have some usage data likely on the loop, particularly to justify, you know, trying to close gaps or extend the pieces that we have, so.
Seems like with the buildup of West Lawrence, there would be more people using the shared use path on 6th Street on this project, potentially.
Yeah, to get out to the,
Yeah.
So I have a question and then some input, but I'll wait till after public comment for that. But as far as 6th Street goes, I mean, it sounds like likely for approval from KDOT, but how does the high access roadway with a bike path on it, I mean, did they look at that and consider that? I mean, would that have a negative impact on whether it gets approved?
no, I think it actually has a positive impact. One of their scoring criteria is the actual traffic volume adjacent to the facility.
Well, I'm asking about the driveways, the
Oh.
access points.
No, I don't think that's a knock against it from KDOT's perspective, as far as being a side path versus a standalone path, you mean? One of the other scoring criteria, like access for non-motorized, you can make the case that it opens up better access for peds to get to Dale Ends, to get to the park there off Rockledge. So, I think it opens up some better pedestrian access to those things, but definitely have to take a look at the driveways and things when you're developing these to try to make them open, site-wise, safe.
Okay, thank you.
I came up with one more, sorry. The 14th, 23rd on Mass, are we talking about buffered bike lanes? Are we talking about painting bike lanes basically without any other improvements to the street?
Yeah, it'd be similar, I think, to the section that's already under design
Oh, it'd be similar to 11th to
with
14th?
with the green pavement.
Okay,
It would be a buffered bike lane.
would be a buffered bike lane. Would there be some mill and overlay or some other?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
most of the reason why it costs as much as it does, because you'd have to take care of the pavement first.
Okay,
That project also would include completing the gap sidewalk on I think it's the west side of Mass Street from 21st to 23rd, I think is where it's at.
yeah.
So when you do the bike facilities with these grant projects, you'd also do the pedestrian facility. So that would be included in the cost.
Are there any other questions on that?
No, I just
For now?
want to point out, this is the old countywide bike plan.
That's actually the pedestrian bicycle shoes. Oh,
Yeah,
it's on there
bicycle,
also.
yeah, and
Yes.
so
I've been
Sixth
looking for that
Street
map.
is part of that. All of this fits on this plan as it exists now. They're getting ready to revise this, but this is all sort of completion of what's
Yeah,
been in the works.
all those add points to being an MPO plan or regionally adopted plan, et cetera, so. Yep. You want me to leave that? Okay.
Thank you. Is there public comment on this item?
Hi, my name is Matt Kirkland. First, I want to say all those projects sound great and would be big assets to the city. That's exciting. And then this is firmly grounded in my experience, and I understand, I don't know the full picture of everything, but from where my family sits, flipping that priority list would serve us really well. I commute down Mass Street on my bike. My family commutes to church on Sunday mornings on our bike, and we try and dodge, there's not that much traffic on Sunday morning. And I do work over in East Lawrence, where the completion of that loop would be nice too. So those facilities would all be great, but they would serve my family really well that way. But also the idea of there being buffered, the green pavement stripe bike lanes on Mass Street is such a great idea, because it would serve ego is not the right word, the picture of our city. Mass Street is such the front porch of the city itself. To have that consistent bike facility all the way through would be such a nice picture of how we can serve all kinds of traffic. But that's all. Thank you. I just have to sign it, right?
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jeff Severin. It's nice to see you all from this side of the table. I'm here on behalf of Friends of Lawrence Area Trails, and I agree with the previous comments. These are all really great projects. As you may know, the FLAT is really working right now to support completion of the loop, and so just wanted to speak in support of that project having a high priority in this process. You may have noticed the budget process, over 50 residents, many of whom we don't know who they are, but I think have been inspired to really get out in full force and advocate for the loop. wrote letters to the city commission. If you have had a chance to read those, you might flip through them because there's a lot of great comments about how important the loop is in terms of transportation and recreation, use for families, and what a great asset it is for our community. We've also been spending time at events such as the community bike ride. We were at a dog birthday party last week, or this past weekend, and hear from so many community members. You know, the first question is, well, when is this going to be done? How soon are they going to complete this loop? How do we get this done? Can we give you money to get this done? And so I think it's really relevant that this is an important priority for our community. And it's something that the community's really been waiting for a long time. And I think, as we saw this, the city has added $1.42 million over the next 5 years, but a lot of that also requires grants to match those dollars in order for those segments to be completed. So I just encourage you to prioritize these sections of the loop so that this vision that the community has been really advocating for can come to fruition sooner. I do think, you know, the 6th Street and other spokes of the loop are very important, but we also hear a lot from community members who are saying that you know, they want separate, safe, continuous pathways to get from point A to point B, and the loop really is a great way to do that. So, thanks.
Hello, my name is Kate Deneen, and I am also here on behalf of FLAT. And I also agree that you guys have a hard choice of prioritizing. Just to go a little further on what Jeff had been speaking about, people using the loop and coming out and being on the loop. Last October, I did something with the Park and Recs department. It was called Walktober, and they walked 5K sections starting the first Tuesday in October, and then every Tuesday and Thursday until they finished, at 11th and Haskell. They would take off from where they had stopped the previous time. And so many people knew their own little section of the loop, but when they did that, they realized this is a whole continuous thing. And people started getting very excited, and since that event, we've had a lot more people who've gotten into this idea of going around the entire city. One of the things that comes up is this going to help our city economically? And from what we've seen, yes, if we can get more events that are on the loop, we can get more, what is it, like say, heads in beds to help with the economy. So doing that kind of thing has added benefits. But mostly, right now, it's that the community is really, really focused on the loop itself. They're very excited about it. So if we can just do bits and pieces, keep moving forward, that would be excellent. And back to the safety part of it, a lot of people go to the loop because it's a safe place to ride. I noticed that Aaron Payton asked about the driveways, and I have a friend who was hit riding his bike when someone backed out of their driveway. This just happened in the last month. So it is a concern, and this person's been riding his bike since I've known him, since the 70s. So even experienced people can end up in events like that. So people use the loop to teach their kids how to ride their bikes because people can't do that on their neighborhood streets as much anymore. People who are in wheelchairs go along there because it's a safe way to get out into nature, things like that. So I'm advocating for the loop, but good luck with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to comment on this? Any more comments? All right. Back to the commission for discussion. Anybody want to start? No? I'd be happy to. I want to sort of second what Mr. Kirkland said about flipping that. Not because 6th Street's not important, but I actually think that's Mass Street's going to make a huge impact when it gets done. And to talk about why it might be really great to have that done first would be that demand map. The most riders, or the most possible riders I mean, I think they're all great, so I know that they're all going to get done soon. But I think that would just have a great impact on Lawrence, and how I think it would make a greater difference in how it is perceived, or whether it's perceived as a bicycle-friendly community. Also, I think we've been talking for years about different facility types, and that is a different facility type that we're getting part of this year, so it'd be great to see more of that. Safe Routes to School and the Lawrence Loop, I mean, they're both great. The Safe Routes to School is a smaller sum there, but the Lawrence Loop, I think that that was something I was not that excited about when the loops really got going. And my reason was because I thought it'd be great for people to get where they wanted to go. And then I spent a day on the loop doing some health assessment, impact assessments, talking to people, and it totally changed my mind because I hadn't met people so excited about something probably ever while living in Lawrence. So I thought I would mention those two things. Safe Routes to School, of course, is the highest percentage of pedestrians we have in town are children walking to school. So,
Yeah, I agree with what she said. And I think the Massachusetts street bike lanes are really important, again, just for that impact and that, just that visual thing that says that we are a bicycle-friendly community, and this is I like what you said, it's kind of the front porch of, that's where we present that, and then the Lawrence Loop, too, because there is a lot of excitement about it now that they've had the surveys and people have been able to, kind of give their opinions about where they want it to go, and everybody's ready for it to happen. So I think, and the other thing about the Lawrence Loop is so many people resist riding bicycles because they're not comfortable riding bicycles in traffic, and this is a safe place to learn to ride a bicycle and then get more confidence, and so that will increase ridership, which is one of our goals, is to get more people on bicycles and out of cars. So, and then again, the Safe Routes to School, because that's our highest number of pedestrians. The 6th Street shared use path, I think, is really, really important. It's one that I use it. I use those sidewalks there to get places. And, I think at some point that needs to be done. But I like that this is divided up into little segments where, if we get these other 3, then we can start on those by prioritizing those. Eventually that will get done. So I would agree with Erin.
so I have a question also, is on that Mass Street bike lane project, would there be something done at 21st and Mass Street where the Bicycle Boulevard meets Mass Street as far as improving the intersection?
Yeah, we would try to look at that with the project. I think that's also why we want to extend the project we're doing this year on Mass Street down eventually to 21st Street to have that connectivity to the bike boulevard. So me and Amanda have talked a little bit about the need to look at that intersection and how that would interact in the future. So that would be something that would be considered with the project.
Great.
Would it be possible, John and Dave, to split these up into smaller, what am I trying to say here? Could we take part of the Lawrence Loop, 8th to 11th, and do part of 6th Street too? Or are they just part of a bigger, is the grant dictating how these things are packaged?
I think, I would think if they could be split out, that if, 6th Street is, the reason we ranked them the way that we did was primarily because they fit KDOT's scoring criteria better than, like the loop, for instance, with 8th to 11th, the challenge with that one, and that KDOT's going to point it out right away, is do you have an agreement with the railroad? Well, no, we don't. So, it kind of takes away our chances of getting that until that footwork's been completed. 29th Street, we may be able to attack that with other funds where, that wouldn't be dependent on the TA grant. So, Yeah, there, I think we wouldn't have to ask for all 4 of Sixth Street if that's what we wanted to do. You know, we could maybe ask for 2 or ask for 3, whichever those highest priorities would be, and then,
Well, my thoughts are that Sixth Street's been on our list, and this isn't the first time we've talked about Sixth Street. And I just, there's not a lot of advocacy, at least from the public, that's visible down here for Sixth Street. Catherine would be a good advocate. But I just kind of have a feeling that could be a pretty big deal to get that initiated. I think in terms of what everybody said here tonight, I agree with the Mass Street, the aspect of that's kind of a culture changer. It's so visible and so many people are going to see that. It's really hard not to try to kick that up with the Bike Boulevard. When you see safe routes to school, you kind of, like you point at that's something that's pretty important, obviously, and I wouldn't put that off for any reason on this list. But I wonder, and I'd ask people around the table if that makes sense to do.
It does make sense. I mean, Sixth Street is pretty retail heavy. But I guess my thoughts on it as somebody who has written grants before is they're kind of basing it on what's going to get approved with a grant, ultimately. And, if you're trying to get money from outside the city and outside the taxpayer realm, that's ultimately what I think they were looking at, is which one is more likely to succeed in getting grant money. Although I agree that the fact that everybody is really enthusiastic plays a factor, because you don't get a lot of positive feedback. But that's kind of where I think they were coming from on that, and Sixth Street is pretty retail heavy, so economically it would help for people to have a way to get to work, and that's just my thoughts.
Well, I ride the Lawrence Loop a lot, and 29th Street we've talked about that a lot too. There's some issues with Haskell Lane that I think we've talked about dealing with. We did last month, and if we could deal with Haskell Lane, 29th Street would be a lot better off, at least on the interim until it could be really completed, depending on the development. But what I'm saying is, if I could just pick on this list, I'd probably pick something on 6th Street and try really hard. 8th to 11th on the loop is a big deal. With all the railroad stuff, it'd be really a nice move to get that approved and funded and built as far as the loop goes. So I would say we ought to consider that. In the context of getting the grants approved and all that, I'll leave that up to people that have done that more than I have. But
when is our application, when is it due?
well, we need to get approval from the city commission the 21st. The actual application is due September 10th, so it's a pretty quick turnaround after we decide which ones to write for. And the other piece about Mass Street may be, since it's such a huge chunk of that is really in the surfacing, whether that makes sense to look at in terms of when we do our resurfacing, over the years. Maybe it's not that far out. I don't know, Dave, what the quality of that pavement is, but if we've got a resurfacing project and we know about it, that's a good time to ask for the striping money, because you're asking for a lot less. You're not asking for $1.8 million, which really the benefit is the striping, but the lion's share of the cost is in the pavement. So, just that matter of trying to set those up to what KDOT's likely to fund versus, there's a limited pot of money statewide.
Yeah, I'd sure hate to see us take something off to try to get something else and then get nothing or less than what we would have. I understand that's where
That's the philosophy behind the way
I
it's set up.
understand it,
Not that the loop's not important or Mass Street's not, but what do we think will actually get money from KDOT?
Well, KDOT doesn't see this list. They just see 3 or 4 grants going in for projects. So,
Right.
I mean, they don't know that we've eliminated something from our prioritization, I don't think.
Yeah, they wouldn't know that, but we would put together a preliminary cost estimate with the grant that set, and a lot of the money for the Mass Street project would go to surface rehabilitation, mill and overlay, and not just the bike facility. I think that's what John's getting at. So, it's just, and at some point, when we do need to do the maintenance activity for mill and overlay, those funds are coming out of other sources, whether it's usually street maintenance, and that at that time, we're not using any bike ped funds, and we're just restriping the road with that street project. So there's just different philosophies of getting at these projects. The Mass Street project that we're doing here later this fall with the bike lanes, that was through KDOT's highway safety program to reduce crashes, to have a center turn lane. So we're looking at different ways to fund the projects. And so this segment, if we didn't apply for it now on Mass Street, we could look at highway safety money or when we would mill and overlay it. But we just don't have, there's no definitive answers on any of these things. They're all great projects, so.
Yeah.
What was the logic not putting safe routes number one? Because to me, that's a no-brainer for me, I think that would be one that I would consider number one.
It's hard to say without having the grant in front of you to know where their scoring is, because it's all, as a grant writer and reviewer, it's all based on, you get 10 points for this, and 9 points for this, and 7 points for this. So without actually looking at what that scoring is, it's hard for us to kind of know where that's coming from. But I don't know why. I mean, I guess that's a good question on why 6th Street would score higher than safe routes. I mean, was there something specific they were looking for in the grant?
Well, I don't know if it would score higher. The safe routes to school is a different subcategory of the bike ped projects. So all of the bike ped projects, what I call the bike ped category, would all be scored against each other. So like Lawrence Loop project in Lawrence or another community would be scored against the 6th Street project. The safe routes is another subset of money. But as far as ranking the projects, as far as this is our number 1 priority, this is our number 2, the advantage of the 6th Street project is the total project cost, and that we could get $1 million through the grant request for that, versus the Safe Routes to School program, they only max out at $500,000, so you could get $400,000 maximum from KDOT. So if you're trying to leverage how much money we could get, if all other things being equal, you would probably apply for the one you would get more funds for.
Got it.
That's not to say that we can't have safe routes be the number 1 priority. When we did this application the last time for the tunnel project at 19th and Iowa and the safe routes to school, we said they're both about equally as important, but we were getting more funds from the tunnel, and we ended up getting both of those, so it didn't make a difference. But that's one of the other things we would want to think about, so is the amount of funds that we could get.
I would agree with Steve that if we could kind of separate these out, that if we're talking about the Lawrence Loop and we had to eliminate something, the 29th Street part of that could wait a little bit, as long as they fill in the potholes on 29th Street that are there. But the 8th to 11th Street, I think, is one that the public, again, is very excited about, and I would like to see that get done, knowing, though, that there are a lot of hurdles in that project. It would still be nice.
And I think if we did submit on that we would, reach out to the railroad as soon as, we knew the commission was behind that to, try to get some letter of support or some understanding. But, if they tell us to take a hike, that project's dead, whether KDOT gives us money or not.
Right.
So.
What would we do? Go ahead.
It seems like something we should know before we ask for money for that leg. whether the railroad's going to be positive about it or not.
Yeah, so I'll try to give everyone a brief recap of what we did recently with the Lawrence Loop, but we did that alignment study through the MPO and looked at different alignments, and that kind of narrowed down what the community's priorities were for this is the preferred alignment. And for that segment there, from what I call around Hobbs Park to Constant Park there, it was, the preferred route was along the railroad. We met with the railroad and said, well, this is our preferred alignment. What do you think about it? And their first answer was no, but because the proximity with the distance to the tracks was too close for their policy. They did say that if we had more further along design plans that we could show them and use that to discuss further, what the exact proximity would be, what's the distance, the elevation, those type of things, the separation that they would consider further. So, it's kind of the chicken and the egg. How much money do you spend at continuing to study versus to go a different route? But based off that alignment study, we do think that we want to do some more work with working with the railroad, and so this Lawrence Loop application that includes building 29th Street and or the 8th to 11th segment would also open the door to continue the design of this segment north of 8th Street that goes down to Constant Park. So that would be included with this application, is to continue to study that segment. And if we apply or don't apply for this or don't get the application, we do have I believe $100,000 in the budget next year to continue that study and to continue to make progress. So there's still that possibility as well.
The only bad thing about the grant is it doesn't cover the study or the design. It only covers construction. So you have to have something you can build.
So, unless somehow that would make the grant more appealing, which it doesn't sound like it would, or it doesn't sound like it would make a difference, it seems to me that taking all of something, with the exception of maybe 6th Street, because it looks like you can separate it out more, it seems like taking all of something is nice because it would be nice to complete something. I mean, then, we always have those little, we have a bike path or a bike lane from here to here. And so if you take all of the loop, or I know that's not all of the loop, but if the closer you can get to completing it and the way that feels to the community, it seems like it always has a greater impact when you complete something and people can see that it's completed, and you can start doing things like wayfinding because there's actually connections to those places. So I would say it's better to take large chunks or something that can be done in entirety. So that would be my argument against something like just doing 29th or 8th to 11th and doing bits and pieces, just trying to do it an entire piece of, one of the sections on the bike map or pedestrian, the safe routes to school sections. So.
Yeah, that makes sense to me too. Would we do 29th to 31st? Is that the idea? And it would not be affected by the future development, which I know is a big unknown. Does that development affect what we do on 29th to 31st?
Well, I think the alignment of that path would just be from where the path ends along Haskell there over to Haskell Boulevard or Haskell Avenue. So it'd be along 29th Street.
I thought we were.
Oh, it would.
I mean, this was budgeted in 2017 to do that path. So I thought it was deferred because of the discussions about development. Is that funding still available?
It was lumped in with other projects from the 2017 bike ped funds, which included that segment of the Lawrence Loop by Rock Chalk Park and the Safe Routes to School and CDBG. They were all lumped in to use those funds. After we obligated some of those projects, a couple of them were over a little on the original estimate. I believe there was about $50,000 remaining in those funds, and that's not enough to complete that segment. So we started looking at preliminary, we got through to about halfway design plans on that, and I think our cost estimate for that segment was more than we originally anticipated, so it's still pending having additional funding to complete it. So there was some remaining money, there still is some remaining money from when it was originally planned a couple of years ago, but.
So the,
But the gap does, the filling the gap should score well with KDOT because you're, like you say, you'd have a long route. Well, you know, the creek trail and then what ties into the SLT and around, you could make the argument that those are two discrete pieces right now, where if we connect it now, we have, you know, 8 miles of continuous where we had 3 and 5, you know, separated before.
so I don't want to belabor this, but it was in the 2017 CIP, project number PR 1713 CIP, install trail to connect 29th Street to Haskell, 75,000. It wasn't in the general category, it was under Parks and Rec's CIP project list. But apart from the funding, I thought we were deliberately not doing that because of concern about the alignment of the trail, that it wouldn't go right across. And we've even just recently talked about Haskell, you know, the cut-through traffic on as a Haskell lane. So, I mean, it feels a little, this one seems like it has some other problems to be resolved before we lay down a path. So I think it sounds to me like both of those loop ones, well, the loop is important. Neither seems like it's really clear where it's going or how it's going to, you know, make that connection. Am I wrong? I mean, is that 29th one been finalized?
Well, I know there's been some discussion on if that property were to redevelop, could there be another route? Could you take another route? You probably could, but there's no agreement with the landowner that they would dedicate the right-of-way or build the path. So,
I thought there was.
not that I'm aware of. So, the plan on our priority network has been to do that segment along 29th Street, to complete the segment along 29th Street, which we've looked at the south side of the street. And so, while if tomorrow they came in with a proposal for redeveloping that land, and there was a better way to reroute the trail and realign the intersection, absolutely, it would be great. But there's no timeline to do that. We haven't heard, or I haven't seen anything recently to indicate that that's going to go forward anytime soon. And so you could certainly just sit around and wait and then work with them to put it in the path with their project, but that could be years from now. But
Well, I thought there was some traffic calming on 29th as well, or the Haskell Lane, where we were going to limit people being able to turn north onto it from 31st Street.
yeah, I think we talked about that too.
Yeah, and that would help.
That's in the works.
It would play into helping that crossing there, but not necessarily exactly where the path is at in the future.
So essentially, on the 29th project would be from the Burroughs Trail to Haskell.
Yes.
You'd basically do a mill and overlay, and there are a lot of potholes there you dodge. So it would clean up the road and put bike lanes in?
No,
just a trail on the south side.
Yeah, it's just a trail
Shared use path.
and the,
Oh, a shared use path
yeah.
on the south side of 29th.
Yeah. And
Okay.
as went through some of the preliminary design and there's some drainage concerns, and there's no curb and gutter now, so to add some curb and gutter and have an appropriately wide trail, 10-foot. We may need a little bit of right-of-way or easements, and there's some drainage concerns with the channel that's there close to the intersection and bridging over that. So we would essentially need to extend that. There's a box structure there close to 29th and Haskell that would need to be extended to have a wide path over it. So there's some costs there to do that as we got through the design, we kind of upped the estimate a little bit, so.
Well, that would serve pedestrians and people wheeling really well. I'm not sure how many bicyclists are going to jump over into the shared use path at that point. But a lot of people walking and kids on that trail, so that would be a nice amenity.
I think I would, just to avoid the potholes. I mean, I've ridden through there.
I mean, it's already shared use
You gotta
path.
Keep your
Yeah.
heads up.
The segments that, you know, the piece that's missing is you gotta go on the road, so shared use path would connect the other two shared use paths.
At that intersection there, I think the biggest risk to cyclists and pedestrians is what's coming from the north, because they jog around there to avoid the intersection with the light, so they can cut down that little leg of Haskell and just turn or whatever. Because they are the ones that don't have any stop signs or anything like that. The people coming from the south do have a stop sign, and sometimes they actually stop for cyclists, but the people coming from the north don't, ever. And that's the traffic that somehow, if you're going to have a shared use path through there that's going to cross that, you need to figure out how to get that traffic to slow or stop or something.
And so the development piece is not the reason this is pending anymore. It's pending because the budget wasn't sufficient?
Correct.
Okay.
Funds and design.
I think that's an important segment to finish. I mean, it's been one of those, if we thought it was budgeted, it never got done for various reasons. You know, and it's not a big budget item. So it seems like we're trying to pull this apart. I mean, that one feels like there's nothing really holding it back except money now.
It's good low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. I don't know, I think the 8th to 11th seems like you're going to hit KDOT's, I mean, we've tried this one so many times, and it every time comes back with big fat sorry.
Yeah, the only difference on this time, the previous applications, we had different routes, and we always said, well, we could use this, go this route, we could go that route from Hobbs Park to Constant Park. This application would just be 11th to 8th along the old railroad spurs that they're not using anymore. So if you look down that path now, it's overgrown with weeds, and in the past, I think they used that spur to back up cars or store rail cars, which they're not doing anymore. So I think if we're able to knock the door down on that segment and then continue the discussion, because once you get to 8th Street, you can still have different routes. You could, if we get some approval to go keep along the railroad, you could do that, or you could take the path along the street in front of the depot and another way. So I think that's what makes this a little different than the loop projects in the past, that we think that we could actually construct these two pieces. That's going to still take some discussion with the railroad on that, where their spur is at, but I think it's a little more feasible than what we've submitted in the past.
And this would be submitted as phases or segments, so they could say yes to one piece and not, I mean, that was.
There can be some negotiation there. If they say, well, we only have X amount of dollars left, we'll give you money to do half the project, any of these, that too could be a possibility.
What differentiates 6th Street? It seems like it always comes up as a really high priority. And in your minds, what differentiates it from the others and causes it to be the top of the list?
Well,
Are you talking about our bike ped priority list or on our grant priority list?
Grant priority list.
you can answer.
That's what we're talking
Yeah.
about.
From a grant priority list, in the memo, I guess I kind of touched on a few things where the key factors are, and I'll just look at my list here quick. The fact that it has the multiple components of bike ped. There's also a category for non-motorized routes, safe routes for non-motorized. So the way that it provides access to the park, the way it provides access to the grocery store, the way it provides access to transit facilities. So that it touches on a lot of different areas that they give you points for. as well as the amount of traffic along Sixth Street, the amount of, the fact that it's more of a regional, since part of it is US 40, to where that, from their standpoint, I think they'd rather pour money into, a national highway system type project versus what might be considered more of a local priority. So I guess looking at it from their perspective, those are the kinds of things that maybe help it score a little higher. Also, the readiness is a huge thing, where Sixth Street we can do primarily within existing right-of-way. Very little, if any, right-of-way needs to be purchased to complete that project. So that makes it, the ability to be shovel-ready, we don't need any kind of an agreement with the railroad, which can take years, potentially, the public involvements, as far as doing the bike ped priority list, it is at the top of our list, and so we ask for money for something that KDOT knows, we would like you to fund number 10 on our list and leave these other 9 alone, where in this case, we're asking in our grant to fund what is listed in our published priority list as our top priority. So all those factors, I think, is what, when you actually sit down and go through the scoring criteria, Sixth Street bubbles to the top. And safe routes to school, I think you could make an argument that could be 1 if you wanted. But it's comparing apples and oranges a little bit. But for the non-motorized category, Sixth Street, when you look at it, how it stacks up against KDOT's criteria on readiness and some of their other factorness is probably the most likely to get funded, I would say.
If it weren't on this list to apply for a grant, what would be the next opportunity with or without a grant to fund this project?
It could be as soon as we decide how to use the 2019 bike ped funds. And so here, what we're also looking to do here this fall, as we discussed before, start looking at having a plan for the next 5 years to kind of allocate the dedicated bike ped funds that we have set aside. And so we need to start discussing how we would prioritize all of our long list of bike and pedestrian projects to use those funds and what the priorities are going to be. But it could be as early as 2019 if those funds don't get used to match another project. So
and it scores high, even if it's not on a grant list.
Well, it's if we're following the criteria, just the bike ped criteria that we developed, it was the highest scoring project. Now that's just a conversation starter to kind of start the conversation, but based off the criteria that we used to score all the projects, it was the highest. So, but again, we would, have that discussion in the future when we're looking at 2019 or 2020 funds.
But if we got that money for Sixth Street, then that frees up money to make, so that we can maybe do Massachusetts Street or the Lawrence Loop. Different flavors of money we can redirect.
Well, and having a solid plan for the loop and agreement on where that thing's gonna go and the right of way, some legwork up front, is gonna put that project in a lot better position in future years for grant. Where right now it's just not in that position to be able to ask for those money. A lot of sections aren't.
Yeah, and I think the only other thing that I would add is in our looking at the projects and between the Lawrence Loop and maybe the Mass Street project is that obviously the Lawrence Loop has a lot of community support, probably the most of any of these projects, and we've applied for it in the past, and I think still want to keep applying for it in the future. So that's another reason why I think it's we want to apply for the loop regardless, even if it's the 3rd ranked project as far as likely to be funded, just because we've done it before, and no matter what, I would anticipate us applying for that in the future as well, different segments. So that was another part of our thinking on the ranking.
So you're asking us to pick 3 and not prioritize them?
We would like some feedback on prioritizing the projects.
Do we have any sense when the Massachusetts Street road project might happen? I know you've always said it's a few years away, but
yeah,
this is a 2020 grant project, right?
Mhm.
So it's really a couple years from now anyway. Just looking at I know it's future, so who knows if the CIP will change, but 2021 is when the bike ped projects goes up to $1 million. And didn't know if that was like possibly when that street will get redone.
I don't know at this point. I mean, if we thought we were going to do it in the next couple of years, 1, 2, 3 years, we'd hold off on it. I don't think it's in bad a shape as some of our other streets as far as maintenance goes. So depends on funding and how it holds up, but there's no timeline on it.
But this would require, this proposal, that $1.4 million, that assumes that a mill and overlay to get that.
Correct. Yeah, you'd have to mill and overlay in order to put new stripes on. Which that would be probably another, maybe not from a grant standpoint. KDOT would want the money going direct into
Bike ped.
the bike ped, where 90% of that project is in the pavement.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that one's kind of been going back to the sidewalk or ped bike issues task force. I mean, everyone's really interested in seeing Mass Street be redone. But it always comes back to the road is not, it's not bad enough shape to justify doing it. So just to do it for bike ped doesn't seem to be appropriate. Personally, I'm pretty satisfied with the way staff had ranked these. I think as soon as we heard about this, the 6th Street shared use path hit my mind, because I know it's, every time we look at it, it's just too expensive. And to have KDOT, help fund 80% of the cost seems like they might finally get this one off the list. If we had to prioritize internally to that, I would think moving from the Wisconsin out make more sense, just because of the bike demand map showing us there's more usage or potential usage closer to the city core. And I think that Iowa to Wisconsin is probably just going to have more likelihood of actually getting use, given that Iowa Street's a highway too. So I don't know if you need to get that level of detail around ranking internally to that proposal, but.
Yeah, we can, and that's the way they're kind of listed right now, is moving from Wisconsin back, and I think that's how they're listed in our bike priority as well.
Yeah, I think that seems to be the right way to segment those if you have to do them piecemeal. I would have put Safe Routes top just because we've gotten 2 rounds of funding and it seems like they want to fund that, but I feel satisfied with staff's explanation of why you put that second.
I'm still hung up on Mass Street. I understand why, I understand what you're saying, but I still can't help feel that a lot of what we talked about in the Bicycle and Pedestrian Issues Task Force was for transportation. And I know people use 6th Street for transportation, for bike, but it's that demand map that really makes me think, you have the loop and people can go recreate, but the biggest difference it's going to make in Lawrence for culture changing is to get people, especially with the downtown master plan and stuff coming up, to get people to be able to go downtown or want to bike downtown. And I can say that for my family, from where we're at. That would make a huge difference, to be able to bike downtown. I think that would just really sort of reinforce all the momentum that's gone into bicycle and pedestrian and making Lawrence more bikeable and walkable and transit-friendly would be to have something like that to really make it easier for people. And I think what you have on 6th Street is people will use it, and there will be more people that use it because it's there, but when you start thinking about, say, a 12-year-old biking, what's going to make the most difference? I mean, a shared use path is great, but when you have multiple driveways that you have to look out for, and cars that are going faster, I think that's harder. I know what you're going to tell me now, and probably that's the purpose. But it's also a major highway, which I think people tend to want to stay away from. It's like 23rd Street. And so that's the issue, is like, I think it's a more pleasant biking experience when you're looking at those older areas, and when you're looking at lower speeds. So people tend to stay away from the higher speeds and areas that just don't feel as comfortable. And I think, like I said, it makes a big impact, that street will. And you have a lot of neighborhood buy-in. I know Barker neighborhood, that was part of the neighborhood plan. So I think that they also sort of have bought into that possibility. So I would be inclined to rank them mass, probably safe routes, and then the loop.
I really worry about, is there such a thing as wasting our ask? Where these are projects, the loop especially, that is going to take a lot more work to even get permission to do this as it's presented with the railroad. And then I worry about the Mass Street project, and if that is mostly just repairing that road in order to do those stripes. Is that, I mean, would they would not look as favorably on that as on a 6th Street project?
That's our
The way I'm
opinion.
understanding it.
That's our opinion of the following their scoring criteria.
If the grant were approved for the loop from 8th to 11th, would you have to use that money in a certain amount of time or lose it?
Yes.
So you don't have forever to talk to the railroad.
Correct.
You've
Yep.
got to get that done like
Yeah, I think it needs
Now.
to be obligated by October 1st of 2020. Right? Fiscal year 2020.
Federal fiscal year.
Federal fiscal year, which is October 1st.
So the
Yeah.
action item, or action is, provide input on narrowing and prioritizing list to present to City Commission. So I assume what you want from us is a motion. Doesn't sound like it has to be a motion, that we want to see 1, 2, 3.
We would prefer
Correct.
that.
Okay.
Yep.
I'd like to comment in response to your Mass Street one. I don't disagree that it would be an
Cool
important
statement.
statement. And I think it's one that, kind of like the loop, there's a lot of support for it. I agree with that. I just think for this particular grant, it's probably not a good fit. And we're about to make decisions in a month or so about the 2019 allocation for bike ped. There's not enough there to do the Mass Street, and it's probably not, I'd hate to see us use all the bike ped just to repave a street. But 6th Street is probably the least difficult way to get east-west on the north side of town. And if you're on a bike with kids, like I am not going to take them on the sidewalk.
I was going to say, we might spar over this.
If it's a little wider, like a shared use path, I mean, I've had my kids on the shared use path going further west. And if I want to take them to downtown, we're taking the back roads, we're taking Trail,
Yeah, I was gonna
Lawrence, Princeton,
Yep.
2nd Street, boom, we're getting to the loop, and then we're going to Constant Park. So that path is a little bit roundabout. You know, it was a 10-mile bike ride of my, was she 8 years old when I did that? And, you know, if I could have taken her on 6th Street and gotten all the way to Wisconsin, the piece that might be missing to make this kind of fully seem good would be the bike boulevard on 5th Street. Because that was the discussion about this, was we need to get people, you know, all the way to downtown, and you don't have right of way to make a shared use path all the way. So as soon as you get to Wisconsin, jog people over to 5th Street, have a bike boulevard, gets them down to Constant Park, and then they're in downtown. So if 5th Street can be a bike boulevard that we queue up with some more funding that is available in 2020, if this were to be approved by KDOT, then I think in one season you could see a pretty nice way to get east-west across town on the north side of town. And that feels, going back to your comment about a full project, that would be impressive to show, you know, there's a safer way to get all the way from, you know, the far west side of town down to downtown, and the elevation change isn't that significant compared to trying to take someone down Lawrence Avenue.
Until you're trying to get back home.
You know, though, it's actually, it feels less difficult to go up 6th than it is to go up Lawrence. And that, you
Yeah,
know,
it does.
and it's more direct, so, I mean, it would be the easier way to ride.
So I have a question. The next lump sum, like you would want to see for Mass Street, like where is that lump sum going to come from besides a TA grant? Like what else could it come from? That big a sum?
To do the Mass Street project? Well, I mean, if we, it could come from bike ped funding, or it's, if you're.
Bike ped funding for 4 years?
It could be a couple of years.
Street maintenance.
I think 2020, it goes up to $750,000 a year, then 2021, I believe, is when it gets up to $1 million a year, and it's $1 million for the rest of the new sales tax term. But yeah, it could be that, or we wait till we do the mill and overlay, and then you're
But
essentially
like
not
you
using
said,
any
you don't
funds.
know when that'd be, so that
we
could be
don't.
7 years?
Could be.
Longer?
Could be less, could be more. I just don't know. It depends on street maintenance funding and the condition of the street and.
On average, are we about every 10 years for a street like that?
I'd hate to say 10, it's probably a little longer.
10 to 12?
Mhm.
Wow.
And
I remember a couple of years ago you said maybe 5. So
It's
So it looks
holding
like-
up relatively well. We've seen when we've evaluated this segment that we're doing here this fall now for the 11th to 15th segment or 14th, it's not as in bad a condition as we thought. So it wouldn't normally need the mill and overlay, but we're leveraging the KDOT funds through the safety program to do that mill and overlay. So it's a win-win, I guess, but.
So a year from now, we could be doing this again
For TA
for
application?
TA applications?
Yes.
Yeah. That's true.
So, that was unintentional. Well, that's,
I tend to agree with Charlie. I think the way they laid it out is fine, although I'd make an argument to move safe routes up, only because I think it'll get approved. I'm just struggling with spending $2 million to basically pave a street. So I will make that motion.
Yeah, and I don't disagree. But I just think about other goals that were made as part of the task force, like, or maybe that wasn't, it's been so long, I can't remember. But, you know, Lawrence is a bronze bicycle community, and I think that one would make a huge difference in changing that. And
I would add one thing on the timeline for Mass Street.
all right,
We could go out there and restripe it without milling and overlaying it. So we may want to take a look at the condition, and we could maybe make a judgment call on how long it might be before we mill and overlay it. Because what we don't want to do is just do the restriping and then we spend a couple $100,000 to restripe and then you mill and overlay it and that money's, goes,
Right.
it's washed away,
Pavement's
but.
not in good enough condition to ride your bike in that area.
Yes, that's another factor. So,
That would mean it
Right.
needs a mill and overlay, doesn't it?
that's exactly right. So, but that's kind of what we did on 9th Street when we
Wait a minute here.
reconfigured the lanes on 9th Street from Mississippi up to Emory. We mill and overlaid a segment. The other segment wasn't as bad, and we just restriped it, and it's held up okay. But so to go back to your question, I would say that that doesn't necessarily mean we have to spend that much money of bike ped funds to do it. You could do it for less and just restripe it quicker and get it done
Right.
quicker. So.
Well, I think one thing that's critical, though, that I saw about this that was sort of important to me, as you said, that included in that was some sort of change in that intersection at 21st Street. So you have a bicycle boulevard that connects to Massachusetts Street, and that really changes things as far as the comfort. So that's one thing I saw in that was kind of important. And whenever it gets done, I think is critical to making that a really good intersection and comfortable for cyclists. So that's really kind of the motivation or the thought behind that.
Yeah, all the intersections are challenging, but I think 19th as well is another one that'll have to be addressed with buffered bike lanes through there.
Yeah, that one, I mean, because I did this when we did the Bicycle Pedestrian Issue Task Force. I went out and biked the map that was proposed. And so going from 21st Street and turning left onto Mass Street was just extremely challenging. And so, there's a light at 19th. And so, I mean, that was really what I saw as driving that, making a big difference in the culture change, I guess. So, anyway, just the mind web of that, thought I would share. So it sounds like people are pretty comfortable with 6th, safe routes and the loop. That order.
I just think fiscally speaking, if that's the one that you're more likely to get the funding for, that's where the priority needs to be, because then if they say no, then you're stuck with 4 projects again.
Well,
I'm just trying to put it that.
I'll support that. I would say that when the city commission gets our input, that it would be really good if they could get some enhanced discussion of Massachusetts Street and how it was difficult. I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time, and I think the public shares, the concerns about Massachusetts Street. So we're not the governing body on this, and to pass on a list of priorities is one thing, but to pass on, the context of the discussion to them would really be helpful, and I think kind of put some people's minds to ease,
Sure.
including mine. So
Perhaps that means it needs a dissenting vote for that order or something like that. So
Perhaps it does.
Sounds good.
the video will speak for itself.
Yeah, if they watch it, yeah.
How about,
I know some.
how about tie for third? We
You're
can
right,
do that.
yeah, right.
We'll point it out.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so is there a motion?
I made it about 10 minutes.
Oh, you did?
I'll second.
Did I miss that? All right, all in favor of that?
Second.
Ron and I
Oh, yeah,
second.
Charlie, sorry. Motion by Ziegelmeyer and second by Brian. Sorry, it's not even a long night. All right, all in favor for 6th safe routes in the loop, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, I'll just dissent for, obviously, we need the grant, so I'm not sure if it makes sense to.
Well, that's okay, and your priorities were Mass Street, Lawrence Loop, and then the.
Yes.
Mass Street safe routes, then the.
Mass
loop.
Street safe routes and the loop.
Okay,
Yep,
we'll point that out.
all right, great, thank you. All right, staff items?
We don't have any staff items.
Darn.
Says the staff.
David, do you have any idea when we're going to see the new traffic calming? We put this off for 8 months now, and we've got citizens that are asking, so I really think we need to develop that quickly.
We're working on it. Yep.
That's what we said in January.
Well, we've had some discussions with our multimodal staff team that includes the police department, and some of that, we've had some staff discussions on how much safety component we could get in, you know, how much enforcement and education and those type of conversations. So we were waiting a couple months to get through the budget discussion on whether or not we could shift the funds into the general fund that could be paid, that could be used for education or enforcement. And instead of making that decision first, we're working on the policy to take that policy to the city commissioner, the transportation commission, the city commission to get feedback. So it's high on the priority list. We'll do the best we can to get it here as quick as possible.
For those that weren't at the public meeting about the Bike Boulevard on 21st, would you mind providing a kind of brief summary of how that discussion went?
Sure. So we notified the adjacent neighborhoods of the proposed Bike Boulevard project, which we're right now sending out an RFQ to consultants to get someone on board to look at different design options. And so we, at the meeting that we had last week, we kind of just went over the concept of what a bicycle boulevard is, what the sweet spot is for traffic volumes and speeds, and probably just more general terms what the process will be moving forward, which what we plan on doing is procuring a consultant that has some experience in bicycle boulevards, going out and getting traffic counts on streets in the area, not just on 21st Streets, but the side streets as well, and having them come up with some different ideas on what could be done for both the 21st Street segment, which was what we talked about at the meeting, was more 21st Street, but also we would do the same for 13th Street. Come up with some different options, have a public meeting, go over the pros and cons of maybe a little more specific treatments on those two different corridors, get some feedback, have another meeting if we need to follow up, and then bring that to the Transportation Commission before moving forward to final design. So I think it was well attended, and we just want to make sure that since this is the first one that we've done in the community, these projects, that we let everyone kind of understand what the concept is, and start the discussion early on. So any questions on it? I think the timeline is going to go through the fall into the winter as far as the design, so we're not going to rush into it. It is a project that was funded with 2018 bike ped funds, but those funds will remain even if construction, which will get done in 2019, funds will still be there. So we want to keep moving forward to keep making progress on these projects, but we're not going to rush through it.
What's the status of the design? Like, have you picked a consultant?
No, we, I believe, just sent out the RFQ last week, or it's in the queue to go out. Amanda wrapped it up before she went on vacation, so it's ready to go, and so that process will take a little time as well. So,
are you looking at national firms for that, Dave, or regional, or?
Yeah, what we'd like to do is to get a firm that that could work with our local firm. So maybe you have a larger national firm that has some experience, that can provide some input to a local firm that would do some of the, traditional work that goes with projects as far as drawing the lines and attending the public meetings, someone that's local, but also getting the ideas of another firm. So we're kind of looking for something, kind of maybe a team type effort for the proposal. So that's our priority, at least, if we can get someone that has some of the experience from a national firm, or maybe even we have a local firm that's got a lot of experience in it. But anyone can certainly send in a proposal.
Okay.
Okay. Commission items, we hear from Complete Streets Subcommittee.
Yes, quick report. We met last week, and I guess you could call it a final draft, which will be sent to the legal folks for their review. So we're pretty happy with where we are now, and we'll, I think, Dave, you think that's going to be a couple of months, probably, a month or two?
Yeah, I would give us a little time to go through legal. We're going to discuss it in our multimodal staff team meeting here this week and get some internal comments and then discuss with our legal. And we'd like to do that before we make it public for everyone, but we'll get that draft to you as soon as possible. So that's the one that we've been working on here the most recently, and kind of got that to at least the draft stage that we can.
It's probably a reasonable goal to have the policy approved by the end of the year. That might be a little optimistic, but I think that's doable.
I think that was one of the things that when we started this year that we wanted to see get done by the end of the year. So we'll keep that in mind, that we can keep moving that forward so we can wrap it up.
Just a quick minute. We developed a checklist, and it's a pretty extensive checklist. The policy is relatively broad, but the checklist is kind of things you consider in a complete service design. And we went through, just as a test run, the 19th Street project last week. And, Catherine and I were there, and we probably took 30 to 45 minutes to go through it, but I can tell you that discussion really helped kind of, put your thoughts together. For a group like this, I think it's really beneficial to, kind of go through that process and learn things during that process that I think will affect the outcome. So I think I'm pretty excited about it.
Thank you. And Commissioner Hurt is not here, so no PTAC update. And then Commissioner Schartz on the MPO bike plan update.
Yeah, I attended a work day, it was a couple of Saturdays ago with the MPO Bicycle Advisory Committee, and it was just to kind of go through some of the questions that we might have when we sit down with the final results of the community survey and when they develop the new bike plan. And so we just looked at the what she called the E's of bicycle planning, which are evaluation, education, enforcement, encouragement, equity, and engineering, and kind of looked at all the different categories and things that we're currently doing, and then discussed things that we might need to do in the future. So evaluation includes things like various plans that are in effect, like the KU bike plan or the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, those things that have kind of blueprints that we would be using. The Complete Streets policy fits into our discussion in a couple of places. The Pedestrian Bicycle Task Force, and then various performance measures that are applied to city plans. And we talked a lot about education and what we need to do to educate both the bicycle riding public as well as drivers. And you mentioned you were going to attend the Confident Capable Commuters bike class. That is one. There are some for children, the bike lesson and safety training program, bicycle-friendly driver programs are things that we can do. Enforcement, there's some initiatives taking place now. There's I think the police are testing something that can measure whether drivers are going by with, farther than 3 feet out, and, they're going to see how accurate that is, and then that would be something where they could actually, notify a driver that they were not obeying the law. Encouragement would be things, one of the things that we spent a lot of time talking about was bicycle-friendly business programs and ways to get local businesses to encourage their employees to ride their bikes to work. So we spent a lot of time talking about that. But there are other things like adopt a park or trail, getting the community involved in upkeep on the trails, bike to work days, helmet and safety fairs. And we talked about, cyclists of all ages, including, kids and adults. And then equity would be things, again, the Complete Streets policy came up there, but environmental justice consideration in project selection. So, and then the Lawrence Unchained Bicycle Co-op was represented there. They help get bikes to people who need bikes to like ride to work or just to have any transportation at all. And then, of course, engineering is just changing the priority network and the structures and facilities. And then the last thing was the next steps. Of course, we have to get together and talk about the survey once all the results are in, and then develop the plan. But then the question was, would this group like to have a work session with that group once they start drafting the plan? And I spoke for us and said yes, absolutely. But I think that might be something where we could have them come to one of our work sessions, maybe. And their question was before or after the draft plan is developed, not the final plan, but the draft plan. So before the draft plan is developed. Okay. So I can get back with them about that, and then we can probably schedule one of the work sessions to include that. But it was a really good discussion. It was a 4-hour meeting. It was pretty lengthy. We just spent a lot of time, mostly talking about how, you can do things like enforcement, but it's really important to get more cyclists out there cycling so that drivers see us and get used to us. But then it's a catch-22 because cyclists don't want to be out there being seen if they're also being hit. So it's sort of, we have to be doing all of these initiatives at once.
We're seeing a little too closely.
Right, yeah, that would be seen that close. But we were talking about how, like in some of the Scandinavian countries where everybody's riding a bicycle, when somebody pointed out that all of the drivers at least know somebody who's riding a bicycle, and so they are a lot more conscious of that. So the more cyclists that we can get out there, the more likely we are to get drivers who are watching out for us, hopefully. So it was interesting.
And based on being in those countries, you always assume that somebody's going to be on a bike next to you. We're here, you never assume.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks,
All right.
Catherine, for doing that.
Thank you so much, yes. So, any other commission items?
I have 2 items. I am a bit concerned, I don't mean for this to seem like it might be in response to the public comment earlier, but at the Bike Boulevard meeting, there seemed to be this reaction from some members of the public that they weren't aware of things, and I know there's plenty of opportunities for the public to be involved in planning efforts, but it seems like there's always someone left out that feels like somehow they didn't know. And I don't know how to fix that. I just want to acknowledge that whatever we're doing is still not enough. And I feel like even today, I was curious, like we're making decisions about, potentially these funding of these projects, and the Safe Routes one, I was specifically thinking, all right, if that funding were to be received, which it has the last 2 times, so odds seem good, how does the neighborhood kind of get told that, hey, this is happening? And I don't have an answer. I just wanted to kind of put it out there that we ought to keep trying to plug away at trying to address that so that people aren't coming here with, well, I'm opposed to this plan. Ideally, the plan gets communicated sufficiently that people can be involved when the planning's happening and all that, so. But it does feel a little awkward when it ends up at the end of the day, the funding's there, the plan's been done for a while, and someone says, I didn't know about it, so I don't know
Well, I
if
think,
anybody has a solution to that, but,
no, I think it's hard. I mean, I think it's a
Yeah.
dissemination of knowledge,
yeah.
dissemination of information issue, you know, and you don't have, like, people don't pay attention to the journal world now and stuff, but it's like, how do you get it out there other than sending everybody in town, you know, something saying this is going on, and then people still don't show up? I mean,
Right.
so I think and that's not even economically feasible. So I think that's the difficulty, is that you have to have a public that's willing to go and be involved in their process, even if it's not.
Yeah, I mean,
immediate
something happened with the
effect on their
Bike Boulevard
neighborhood.
discussion, and it, you know, I forgot who asked the question that night, but it was like, there's been this discussion about Bike Boulevard on 21st Street for many, many years, and suddenly now it seems like there's probably 20, 30 people there that night, so it was a pretty good turnout. And it seemed like the only credible answer was, well, there are neighborhood representatives now that maybe did a better job of getting the message out, and they have tools that they didn't have in the past with social media, online tools. So I just wonder, you know, as we can see where things are going with projects that are funded, how do we get better at sending the message out early? And then when the public comes to tell us, hey, we don't really agree with this, we don't seem to have an answer for that. It's kind of like, well, I'm sorry, it's too late. And I don't know what other options are available, but I'd be curious, you know, how staff might advise us on that, and how you guys are thinking about that. Like, it is a bit awkward just to sit here and listen and then feel like, well, it's too late, sorry. I'd like to have some other options available if there is anything available to us. And if there's not, then just tell me to get over it. But it does feel like, gosh, we're not really here to help anybody if that's our role, just to sit and say, sorry, you're too late. So I'm not asking for any solution, I just wanted to raise it. Sorry. The other thing I wanted to just let everybody know about, and I sent this to staff and Steve and Aaron. The Planning Commission has an annual retreat, or an annual orientation, I think is what they call it. And I went to the one last year, which is where I noticed that they had a kind of a joint discussion with the other elected bodies. And they're doing that again, and it's on the 19th of October, and they've invited the city and the county commission to come have lunch with them, and then they're going to hear about the update to the comprehensive plan. And this is an example of a format that seems to be legal. They're going to manage the COMA requirements in order to make it a publicly acknowledged meeting where they're all gathering, all three, governing body, or commissions, I suppose. And I would think that if it can be done, then if we were to ever do a retreat again, that format, or one that's more informal than the way we handled our work session with the city commission, would just be a better format for us. And if you haven't been to that planning retreat, or the orientation for the planning commission, you might consider it. It's 12 to 2 is the lunch, where they'll have that kind of joint session, and it's Friday the 19th of October. Aaron's on the planning commission, so I would kind of also appeal to you, like, as we're approaching the end of this year, thinking about a retreat, if we have one again, to figure out, like, how could they pull that off, and how can we get the same consideration? Because I think that was something we had planned to do, and then it got shelved because of maybe we didn't follow all the procedures or something, so.
Yeah, I mean, it maybe partly depends on who the secretary is or whatever, but I I'm not sure. I mean, these commissions are fairly different in what they do. I mean, planning commission has quasi-judicial
Right.
functions. However, I mean, I think, and that's another issue, like if you have, I think that especially the way we saw this commission working in the Pedestrian Bicycle Issues Task Force was that, you know, we would really be looked to as important to the decision-making process in a way that Planning Commission is important to the planning process. And to me, those two are, you can't really separate them, but we do. Too much still. But I also think if all 41 groups or commissions wanted to meet and have something like that, that would be a challenge for city staff. But I feel like this commission is different in some way. And I do think that was important last year, and it's a really important, and I think it is really important in educating the commission. And even for planning commission, sometimes we have meetings. I feel like we have a meeting that was canceled because of longer meetings or something. So I think last year we did that meeting or that session was in place of our two regular meetings, or our study session and our regular meeting that month, if I'm correct. So I would be interested in doing something like that again. Was that last January?
Right.
If that were possible or useful, if people thought that would be useful. And to meet with City Commission. I do agree, and I think that was sort of agreed upon, is that we were hoping to have more of a discussion with City Commission, and it was more of like, if you have questions, we'll answer them. Which I don't think anybody was aware of till that day, but I could be wrong. So I don't know if that would be possible, but if so, it would be useful.
Well, we will plan on having that retreat again the beginning of the year, and I will inquire on what all needs to occur to make sure it follows COMA as far as advanced lead time. And I know it has to be kind of specific that you're talking about business and it's not more casual conversation, so that may be some of it too. But as we get towards the end of the year and start planning out next year, I think the retreat's a good thing that we did in January, and so I certainly think there's some merit in doing it again, and I can find out
So would
if the City Commission can attend.
it be useful to say, here's our agenda with City Commission that day, kind of like that happened at the study session but be more of a,
Yeah, I'll find out what would be required to make that happen.
okay. I think that's it. Calendar, next study session, August 15th.
Yeah, so our next day session's next week. We're going to be talking about small town and a rural design guide, mixed traffic facilities, which will include bicycle boulevards, yield roadways, advisory shoulders, so some different type of treatments for lower volume roads. So we're going to talk about some of those different type of facilities and how and what kind of different criteria would make them appropriate, and potentially look at using some of those in Lawrence in the future. So if anyone can't make it, let us know as soon as possible so we make sure we have enough folks there to have the meeting.
Talk about the
Yeah.
August.
Yes,
Yeah.
next week.
I'm out of the country.
Okay. That's highly unlikely I'll be there, because that's the first day kids back. I've got buses on the road, so I'll be pretty busy, most likely.
All right. If anyone else can't make it, let us know.
Is there a motion to adjourn? You need a motion?
Yeah. I move that we adjourn.
All right.
A second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right.